Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is another Red Pill Religion podcast. And tonight we're going to be doing something different than we usually do. We're going to have an informal debate. And with this informal debate, is going to be against two people. I'm going to first explain a little bit what an informal debate is. An informal debate is when two sides actually, are arguing amongst each other with any given topics. There's no actual sources are needed, but I may or may not ask for them during the course of the debate. It depends on how everything goes. So we're going to be doing a talk of Christianity versus atheism, where the evidence lies. And with us, I have I'm going to go with the visitor of the channel, ChuBs. We have say hi, ChuBs. Give yourself an introduction and all that.
Hey, yeah, this is ChuBs. I do have a YouTube channel, but no agenda, just some regular stuff. I'm coming from as a everyday atheist, husband and father. I don't battle. I don't like that. Or even I say argue. Debate's good because argument means somebody can fail. I just trying to get across that the atheists, not everybody, we're not all like people see on YouTube where we're trying to fight or be an anti-theist. We're trying to be, some of us are just trying to live and be every day. But at the same time, I do see that people call atheists, a lesser type of person, that we can be bad. And I'm just trying to break that mold and put my hat in the ring whenever possible. So thank you. Thank you for letting me be here.
All right, you are very welcome, and I appreciate you coming on and telling that. Josh, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, it's great to be here. This is, I think, our first time, our first debate where we're doing something called Saturday Night Fight Night. And this is a debate. It's going to be more informal, and I'm just happy to be here. Usually I like to have a conversation because you can really get to know somebody and you can really go through the arguments in an informal or a semi-informal or a semi-formal debate. But it's just a pleasure to be here. Red Pill Religion, please subscribe, and there's going to be a lot more of these debates.
All right, so I don't have a way to flip a coin because I don't really have any coins on me. Actually, yes, I do.
You think the affirmative should go first?
Well, since the negative is the guest, I would say the negative, but whichever seems fair to you guys. Which do you want? Do you want to take a couple minutes to discuss amongst yourself who wants to go first, or you want me to toss a coin?
Well, ChuBs can go first.
All right, the floor is yours, ChuBs.
Well, first, let me ask, what do you want me to defend? What platform am I stepping on here? What do you want me to go? What do you want? What kind of questions do you want?
The debate is Christianity versus atheism. Where does the evidence lead, or where does the evidence lie? Just defend why you think the evidence leads towards atheism rather than Christianity.
Okay, sure. Coming from, I live in the Catholic South, and I went to 12 years of Catholic school. I became an atheist rather young. I was probably around 10, and I never stopped. I didn't just become no, this isn't true, and put it all away. I never stopped looking into it. I also look at it through the military aspect, because a lot of the battles in the Bible did actually happen. But at the same time, I took all the evidence over the years, and I saw that the stories in the Bible could be traced back to things that happened before the Bible was written. For example, the Ten Commandments are from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I think it's 125. Um, Horus is an example of Jesus. Old Testament to New Testament, Joseph and Jesus had the same info where they had Joseph had 12 brothers, Jesus had 12 disciples, born of virgins, where also something like the actual Sargon of Akkad, not the YouTuber, but the real person has the same story as Moses, put in a basket, found. So to me, it's all religion is just one to answer the where did we come from and answer. They call it the God of the gaps. I don't really like that, but it is filling in the gaps maybe. But it's all just a way to keep everybody in place. And I also think it's also gotten out of hand to where now I see infighting amongst religion in and of itself. Like the real name of Jesus and the Trinity. And I don't think that it if there was a God, he would let this be so abstract where there has to be all this fighting. I come from it as we should be able to just, as a society and as people and as humans, get the point across of how to be better without ejecting a supernatural aspect. Let me just stop there for now.
All right. Well, Josh, it is your turn to do that. I'm going to not speak to either of your arguments, but Josh, it is your turn.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. The subject that we're discussing, the topic rather, what is the evidence for Christianity or Christianity versus atheism? I think there are a number of pieces of evidence for this. I don't know if you've studied Aristotle, but there are a number of arguments from that. A lot of a lot of cosmological type arguments. I don't know if you've heard of something called the Kalam cosmological argument. This was formulated from the Greeks, but really formulated by the Arabic, Hazali. It goes like this: whatever that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. It also argues from the nature of infinity, where you can't count to infinity, and we couldn't have gotten to today in time if there wasn't a starting point. Also, the teleological argument. Let me give an argument for this. The fine tuning of the universe is either due to either natural law, chance, or design. It is not due to natural law or chance. Therefore, the fine tuning of the universe is due to design. I don't know if you're familiar with Robin Collins. Others, such as Stephen Hawking, have given sophisticated defenses of the teleological argument, shown that the initial conditions need to be just put in at the beginning for the eventual emergence of life, for the evolution of life to happen. There's also something called the moral law. Let me run this by you. If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Premise 2, objective moral values do exist. And 3, it follows logically from those premises. Therefore, God exists. Now, you have to come to grips with this. You said in your opening statement, if God, there shouldn't be war. Well, let's consider that we have something called a sin nature. And I think we're all intuitively aware of this sin nature that we all possess. People do things to try to control other people. So, is God and evil, are they logically contradictory? not if people have freedom of the will, if they can freely decide to do something. Now, we can get into a debate about whether we do have freedom of the will, but intuitively, we know that we are our own cause of our choices. We can freely decide to raise our hand. We can freely decide to take one of two actions. Our law system in the US is also based on this. I often argue from something that happened in the history of philosophy, something that happened in the 18th and 19th century.
Josh.
Yes.
I'm sorry. You made like three different. You're making three different. You're going into different topics. Along with this, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but where are you trying to go with this?
Well, I think as a cumulative case, they all point towards God in a way from atheism. The beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, the reality of objective moral values, intentionality. I could give other arguments from miracles and so forth, but I think that a cumulative case, and I'll end it right here, a cumulative case, one can plausibly argue for for Christianity over atheism. I want to go into the similarities between Horus and Moses or Jesus. No New Testament scholar today believes that, except Robert Price and Richard Carrier and maybe one or two others. But that was alive during the beginning of the 20th century in this history of religion school, but it's not alive today. Okay, I'll end it right there.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's your turn, Chubb.
Yeah. Let me just address, what I can there. I do know a little bit about the, what Aristotle said and Thomas of Aquinas' cause and all that. And I'll be the first to say that I do see intelligent design when I look around, but I don't see the designer. People always say a tornado can build a plane. True. We can track down in our world what builds everything we see, how nature works, but I don't see God being, personally, coming from an atheist, I haven't seen any evidence, but I do see everything is intelligent and something had to start it. But without a time machine, I can't say that any of us will go back and see that. I've seen a lot of arguments over and over about, the morality subject, and I don't think anybody's going to get anywhere with just like the evolution, intelligent design, and all that. I've seen a million videos about everybody going down to the molecule on this and that, and I don't think that's getting anywhere. I can tell you, as an atheist, that well, as an atheist and a father, like children who can't even understand God if we tried to explain it, can understand when we say that is wrong. And when a kid feels bad because somebody makes fun of them, we have to explain that, and they have no concept of God. We can't explain that. I also like to tell, there's a famous video of a baby that fell in a gorilla cage, and the gorilla took care of the baby and saved its life. That gorilla has no idea about God. So I feel without God, you could still tell people right from wrong. You feel bad when somebody does something to you, and then you turn that around to, I guess it goes back to people like to say, doing to others to do unto you. That's the basis. Religion is just using certain circumstances, using the stories, the fables, to get that point across. So I don't think you need anything, because if we didn't, people like to say, well, if we didn't have God, we wouldn't know. Why not just go crazy? Well, we would all be extinct if we just did what we wanted. It wouldn't make any sense. Like people talk, animals do what they want. Well, if that was true, they would all be killing themselves off, but they still know how to act in their own little way. I think it's just what we do. And the only thing I try to attribute to evolution is there's lions that lived in the Sahara in Africa. They lived around these big thorn bushes, and over time they lost their manes to be able to get through those thorn bushes. And that to me is just, that's something evolving. I can't go back to the beginning of everything, but I can see it happening as we go. So those are just some of the, trying to hit some of the points that you just said. So I'll throw it back to Josh.
Well, I appreciate it. I very much do. You did bring up a couple of points I strongly disagree with. You said, I do see intelligent design, but you try to explain it away. You can't simply do that. Richard Dawkins tries to do that when he's confronted with the initial conditions of the universe and how complex the cell is and the appearance of design. He tries to explain it away. A common sense interpretation of the facts, though, when you see design, you're gonna look at it and try to explain it. Let's say if you're in a field, and right now I'm using the famous analogy from William Paley of the 18th century. If you see a watch in a field, you're automatically going to ask how that watch got there. Did it arise from natural processes, or did it arise by chance? Was there some kind of law that brought it into existence? No. If you're using common sense, which is trusting your cognitive faculties to give you reliable information, and trusting your sensory perceptions that they are reliable. Remember, we don't have any reason to deny our common sense notions of reality, which I think you even attest. Then you're going to say that watch or apparent design isn't just apparent. It's there for a reason. We do this all the time. I don't know if you're familiar with Immanuel Kant. He wrote a book called The Critique of Pure Reason, which says that for us to even understand things, to us to understand reality, we must presuppose or postulate time and space. These were, to him, synthetic a priori truths that we can know intuitively that they exist. Now, the scientist that views things that are only reliable if they can be perceived by the five senses, and immediately at that, you would have a whole bunch of information, a whole bunch of reality, like music or art or the humanities, that would be explained away or try to reduce to particular instances. Some things I don't think you can explain away. If we're going to use our common sense notions, then we have to deal with these arguments like the beginning of the universe, the apparent design in the universe, which you yourself affirm in everyday life, the existence of objective moral values and duties. Just because an animal or if someone jumps into a cage at the zoo, that doesn't mean that they can't show apparent notions of morality. After all, they're created by God, not in the image of God like us, because I think we have free will and so forth, but they participate. It's something Aristotle called participation. They participate in reason, in the logos. So they can show at least some kind of reason in that. Now, I noticed that you did not address what I said about law. Would you like to discuss law at some point?
Sure. You had said that, we as people provide the law. And let me just address what you just said in kind of the law too. But I actually do like the watchmaker analogy and have heard it a lot. But from what I've been given, as an atheist, I've been given the God example. But from what I've seen is, okay, well, if God made us and said, okay, well, you have free will, so if you do wrong, you're going to be punished for it, fine. But the Bible says that God has stepped in since the beginning of time until Jesus, and then nothing. Why did he have to come in all the time and speak to us? The Bible speaks of angels and demons and fiery chariots, and God spoke to people. Although we supposedly, if you can't handle the voice of God, then they say angels did it fine. So if he's a watchmaker, but he kept stepping in, but now he doesn't. So I think humans had to come in and say, well, God's not coming in anymore. So we have to say, well, killing is wrong and stealing is wrong. So that's my view on that watchmaker situation. Sure, if there was a God and he made everything and it's so complex and great and everything, but where's he been? Because the Bible says he was around for everything, talking, and the devil came and did this, but nothing's happened since 2,000 years ago. So humans had to come in and make the laws because there was no other way to do it. That's my viewpoint on those two things. Does that kind of answer?
Well, I don't think it answers. I don't think it answers it. Here's why. The law, our laws, our civil laws, are based on things like the Magna Carta of 1215 or the English Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, which Jefferson mentions God at least, or the Creator, or something like that, at least 6 different times. I teach this. I teach American history. There was that they are reflections of the natural law that we know intuitively, the civil law and how it's been passed down through the historical process. I'm not sure if you're aware of someone called Jonathan Witherspoon, but he was instrumental in bringing that philosophy, common sense realism, to America. One of the chief advocates was Thomas Reed, and I always talk about Thomas Reed and his critique of David Hume, and I think it was unjustified skepticism. But Jonathan Witherspoon, he was a Presbyterian minister, and he influenced so many of our founding fathers, including James Madison, innumerable senators and governors and representatives. It was based on the founding of America was based on this belief in virtue. All of the founders, all 56 of the people who signed the Declaration, if they would have been caught, they all would have been hanged by King George III. They knew that democracy would inevitably fail, and they all wrote about that we needed to play a part in government, and it was based on to keep democracy, to keep the republic going. It was based on virtue. This is based on Aristotle's virtue ethics. Do unto others as you would do unto do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is what they believed. So our law system, these are instances of the natural law in society. I also wanted to go back what you said about God not playing a part in everyday history. I'm not sure if you're aware of this book, but by Craig Keener, there's a book. It's actually 2 parts. It's on miracles. In fact, that's what it's called, Miracles, a historical investigation. And he argues, and I think it's about 1,500 pages, he argues that miracles, they haven't ceased. They keep going all through history. They keep going to today. There's many parts of the world that experience miracles, that pray to God, and you would have these medically documented cases of where miracles happen. Now, I bring this up for one reason, and it's a person I mentioned earlier. His name is David Hume. A lot of the skepticism that comes out of the internet infidel type community is based on David Hume. David Hume, like I delineated before, he viewed that anything that that was true must come out of the five senses, okay, or be analytically true, okay. So so there couldn't be any truths that you couldn't get ascertained from the five senses, like belief in God or belief in other minds or belief in the external world. Those would be called synthetic a priori truths, which David Hume he did not believe in. He was skeptical of. But I think we can know synthetic a priori truths. And let me give you some. These are from Immanuel Kant. Every experience will take place within space and time. No material thing can be at two places at once in the same sense. A straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. No two straight lines can enclose a space. Now, let me give you some synthetic a priori or economic propositions. An increase in property titles without a corresponding increase in real property doesn't raise social wealth, but is a redistribution of existing wealth. Number two, if we increase the amount of money without increasing the quantity of non-money goods, social wealth will not go higher, but only prices will rise. Now, I could go on in showing that there are things we can know apart from the five senses. We can know things intuitively. This verification principle itself is not verifiable. It's gone through a number of innovations, indentations throughout history into the so-called falsification principle that would demarcate it from science, from history, and you can use it as a rule of thumb, but it doesn't rule out synthetic a priori truths like I just mentioned. So I think we can have a real true knowledge of the existence of God, of other minds, trusting our intuitions, etc., etc. What say you?
I could say that I believe in intuition. I've seen women's intuition pay off many a time. I've actually heard you before in another debate speak about that book about miracles, and I understand where the concept is coming from, but for me,
By Craig Keener.
yeah, I've heard you speak of it, and I've heard you speak, I think it was you, one of the people you're with, speak about a personal experience, and I do understand where you're coming from, but for me, I see that if that's true, well, if the person next to you has something go horribly wrong, was God only paying attention to you and didn't care about that person? Because I've met people that are way holier than any of us and have had some of the worst things in the world happen. So I don't know how God could be helping one person and then just not paying attention over here, so.
Well, why isn't that an argument from silence? I mean,
Silence.
to say that God sometimes works miracles, but sometimes he doesn't work particular miracles in these other cases. Well, why is that not an argument from silence from the atheist?
I just think, I guess I would call it luck, because I was always told that if you believe in God, there is no such thing as luck, because it's all happening because of God. So if the bullet misses me and hits you, was God favoring me, not you? And I don't think that's a good way to judge it, because things happen and people survive miraculous things, and a miracle in and of itself is something that's miraculous, and I get that, but I can't see where God's picking and choosing. And a lot of people say, well, there's all these hungry, starving kids in the world, and then this and that. But that goes back to me where, to me, it goes back to, well, then God just made everything and said, let's see, how it works. You all have your free will. This is what's going to happen. So, but then if there's miracles, he's stepping in certain instances. And why would that be? That just doesn't make sense to me, that he wouldn't do something here, would here. Why would he pick and choose as far as miracles go? Like, I don't see him as miracles. I see him as everything is just happening. Sometimes something happens that looks like a miracle, but it didn't go the worst way that time because horrible things happen. And to say that the thing that's not horrible is a miracle, I just don't see it that way, because then God's only paying attention to that one thing. He's not being silent in the other one, if you want to say silence. But if you're going to say this happened to me or someone and it's miraculous, well, there's 10 for every one that something bad happened. Did he let that happen? Did he make that happen? To me, that rationally doesn't make sense. That's just somebody trying to answer what we don't know. Yeah. So people get an ominous feeling when they go somewhere and they're like, oh, this just doesn't feel right. But does that mean God's making that one person feel it at that time?
To the debate moderator, are we breaking up any?
I am not hearing you guys break up on the live or through my headphones.
Okay. He was breaking up a little on my end. Maybe it's just my computer, my Commodore Afghanistan brand. It's a joke. Okay.
It might be.
I don't see why that is not. Well, I'm sorry. Are you done?
Yeah, you can respond.
Okay, I don't see why that is not an argument for silence. You kept going on about how is that rational, or you can't believe that. That's the general tone that I got from that. You also mentioned a sharpshooter analogy. I don't know if you meant to do this. That's you're referencing something by John Leslie in 1988. He wrote a book called Universes, and he compared the initial conditions of any universe that must be set up at the beginning of the Big Bang for the eventual emergence of life. So you could say all the blue dots are any possible universe that if you change the initial conditions, like the weak magnetic force or the strong nuclear force, that it would change, and you wouldn't have the possibility for the eventual emergence of life. So you could see a whole an ocean of blue dots, universes where life could not emerge, but only one or two or maybe here or there red dots where eventually life could emerge. So I don't think that's a good argument for dismissing apparent design. Now, if you were trying to correlate that to miracles, we use design all the time. We use something called signal detection. We do this in engineering, signal detection algorithms and pattern recognition. If we did not do that, we could not make any inferences about reality. So let's go back to the resurrection of Jesus, because I don't want to go back to Craig Keener's massive book on miracles. We can deny that, or so forth, and go back and forth. But on the resurrection of Jesus, you need to have a sufficient explanation that tries to explain all the data. Jesus's life, his unparalleled life and moral example, his burial by Joseph of Arimathea, how it wasn't a theologically loaded town, Arimathea, and why would they put someone that's a member of the Sanhedrin, the very court that condemns Jesus? Why would they record that? So the criteria that historians have used, like the criteria of embarrassment, that counts in its favor in the Gospels reporting reliable information. You also have the empty tomb, which is implied in 1 Corinthians 15. No Jew would ever talk about Jesus or someone being buried and then he was risen, like in that formula in 1 Corinthians 15, without implying. And I know a number of scholars quotations that say exactly that. So you have the empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances. Even Gerd Ludemann says that it is historically certain that the disciples saw appearances of Jesus, which a radical transformation occurred in them. Lastly, you have the very origin of the Christian faith. How Jesus's resurrection is different from all these other resurrections is that it was within history, okay, and it happened to one particular individual. Now, if you add up the totality of all the evidence from history, and you try to look at it objectively, then I think you can come to the conclusion, unless you're a verificationist. Remember, I gave some arguments against this old line David Humean skepticism. If you come to it with an open mind, you're going to see the evidence maybe not be compelling, but more probable than not. When I was in college, and I'll end with this. When I was in college, I was mentored by someone named Gary Habermas, Dr. Gary Habermas. He is one of the leading historians on the resurrection of Jesus. And, we built a friendship, just not, he wasn't just my teacher, he was a friend also. And, I asked you if you could try to take an objective look at the resurrection, the evidence for it. And I think it may show that atheism is implausible.
Well, I can tell you, and actually lately that's been a very hot topic with the resurrection of Jesus. And my viewpoint is, one, I do believe that Jesus he's based on, I like to say, like Robin Hood, a combination of people, and one guy did exist. And when you look at the information or the evidence, if you want to say, I just say the information, where, yeah, the stories say that his disciples recorded this and these people recorded this, but it seems most of the apostle or Matthew, the Gospels in the Bible were written well after the fact. And I realized that would happen in that day and age where things didn't happen instantly. But we're also talking about, these are all the people trying to get the point across. To me, it's like the fish, where somebody catches a fish and every year the fish gets a little bit bigger. So if you're trying to establish Christianity and trying to get that across, all the stories are within the same group of people. If Jesus did resurrect and come out the tomb and show himself, wouldn't it make more sense to show himself to somebody other than his friends? Like, to get the real point across, he could have went to anybody else.
I think he did. I think he appeared to James, it says, and it also says he appeared to all the 12 apostles at one time. That's
still his people, though. That's still his friends.
Well, but James wasn't a believer, and some of the 12 apostles, like Thomas, wasn't a believer unless he actually saw the resurrection. This is based on this hallucination theory, which is very sparse in the psychological literature, especially when you're dealing with groups of people. You have them eating with Jesus. You also have in some of the earliest Gospels, and I'm going to argue from I could argue from the Gospel of Mark, but I could equally argue for the Gospel of Luke. Luke Acts was written before a certain time because it doesn't mention the death of Paul. It mentions the death of James, Jesus's brother, who was skeptical. It doesn't mention the destruction of Jerusalem. It doesn't mention a lot of different things. So a lot of scholars have dated Acts, which is the second of the Luke Acts compilation, is dated to probably around 62, 63, which would mean Luke would have to be even earlier. Now, here's the cool thing. Luke speaks strongly, perhaps the most strongly, of the physicality of the resurrection. Luke was a companion of Paul. Starting in Acts 16, you have numerous stories and passages that include the we phrase, that Luke was an eyewitness to many of these things. I don't know if you've read any of these books by Colin Hemer. There's other scholars that give entire book form defenses of the book of Acts, how it corroborates many historical instances where you would really have to be an eyewitness or be extremely close in first century Palestine. So I don't think there's any good arguments, especially, comparing Jesus to Horus. That was in the old history of religions with the first quest of the historical Jesus at the beginning of the 20th century.
Oh, okay, really quick, yeah. I'd like to interject. I'm not really sure on the earliest account of Acts that we have, but Acts was written before the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke was written by Luke for a Roman general, I think, who asked who are these apostles, because the Acts was one of the first things. But according to the Eastern Orthodox tradition, Acts, Christ began his ministry in AD 27. So the entire book of Acts goes from AD 27 to AD 62, and that's just some information for everybody.
Real quick, I had thrown the Horus thing out there, but I just wanted to add to it that as far as virgin birth, being crucified, dead for 3 days, and resurrection, we have Mithra in Persia, 1200 BC, Dionysus in Greece, 500 BC, Krishna in India, 900 BC, Attis in Greece, 1200 BC.
Can you give me some sources for that?
I don't know where these all came out of, but I've just seen them over and over again. That, to me, I'm just saying that's. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they came out of the first quest for the historical Jesus, where they tried to find parallels. They tried to find parallels with the overall Roman world. Because of that, and it failed. This was at the beginning of the 20th century, this history of religious school, starting in the ultra-liberal Germany at the time. You have these different movements. The second quest for the historical Jesus in the 1950s. And then you have the third and the one with John Dominic Crossan and N.T. Wright and the Jesus Seminar and Ben Witherington, et cetera, et cetera. The current state of scholarship says these parallels with Horus, with the virgin birth from Dionysus and so forth, these are spurious. The culture, the context that Jews would borrow these stories from Roman and pagan sources is outlandish. And I have a number of scholars that believe this. This was a debate that's almost 100 years old. I hate to say it like this, but your sources are old and they're not up to date. I'm done. Yeah, are you still there?
Oh, sorry, wrong one. Would you say that something like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the first flood story is not correct? Like that's made up too? Like, I just think to get the point across for any religion, they were just repeating to try and keep the same thing going. Like, if we're gonna make this work, we have
Well,
to keep it going. So,
let,
the,
let me
go ahead.
answer you for the Epic of
Yeah.
Gilgamesh. Yeah, I'm not denying that a lot of these cultures, the Babylonians and so forth, Samaria, that they had these flood stories and so forth. Um, you know, that may show the universality of a basic story, that of a flood story that goes back to a particular source. In the Old Testament, it is taken away all these mythical elements. A lot of them are done away with, and you have a more rational viewpoint of depicting Noah and so forth. But be that as it may, I have no fight for this. I don't know if the flood was global or local. I'm agnostic about that. But what I do think, um, you know, I like to focus on the New Testament, and a lot of those things are spurious as far as comparing Jesus to the other figures.
Okay.
And one more thing
Go
before
ahead.
I leave. A lot of this, especially in the first quest, and as the quest, as you go to the second to the third quest, and et cetera, et cetera, a lot of anti-supernaturalistic bias was infused in these different quests for the historical Jesus. You would have Rudolf Bultmann, for example, that would say miracles, the Gospels, the resurrection must be a myth because miracles don't happen. The supernatural doesn't happen. You see, a lot of these historians are going outside their field of specialty, and going into philosophy, to have a proper understanding about these big topics that we're discussing. I think you need to be well versed in something other than just history. You need to have a knowledge of philosophy and so forth. And a lot of them, they simply were, they were heavily influenced, or to put it mildly, by this David Humean scholarship. This David Humean scholarship has been universally debunked. I don't know if you're familiar with something called Ehrman's egregious. I think I'm paraphrasing the book. It critiques Ehrman. It critiques David Hume. It's by John Ehrman, and it shows that Hume's logic in denying or showing that miracles are improbable or impossible, that David Hume's arguments were false, but that penetrated a lot of the history of the search for the historical Jesus.
Well, I'll say first off that I'm not trying to battle philosophy or anything book wise, because again, like I said before, there's a million people out there who can go back and forth about specific details. But as calling myself an atheist, and going from what I know in the info, even if Jesus happened exactly the way the Bible says, I haven't seen anything happen in 2,000 years that says God is still with us and helping us or interacting with us. We can't answer the cause. Something did cause everything to happen, but nothing is showing that there's an outside force doing it.
Well,
Nobody can
let's
pinpoint it.
discuss that.
Okay.
This is a good way for us to go back and forth about miracles. Now,
Oh, well, really quick,
yeah,
we may want to schedule another discussion purely on miracles because that is a large topic, and we don't have very much time left. So can I ask that we do the miracles discussion later in a
yes,
later
absolutely.
video?
Yeah, I'm happy to come
Absolutely.
back. Yeah.
Being trained and having written academic academic papers, not published. I didn't go that route in life, but these were, master's level and doctoral level papers. Dr. Gary Habermas helped me in doing this. Was my mentor, and I do hope in the future I can discuss miracles with others, and you included, ChuBs, and I do appreciate it. But yes, we can go on to whatever you like.
Well, I was just kind of going from, like I said, I'm trying to go from what people say, okay, well, how's an atheist prove this, prove that, or our evidence, but I don't want to even throw back the burden of proof lies in the person making the claim. But some of the things I hear that I'm trying to disprove is like,
I don't know if that's true. I think we're both making claims. If you're trying to argue that the evidence leads towards atheism, then you're also sharing the burden of proof, and you need to give an argument for that. The American atheists, the founding of the American atheists. Um, what's her name? Madeline Murray O'Hare, I believe that was her name. She said an agnostic is just an atheist without guts. That's what she said. And I think to be consistent and to go the historical definition, understanding of what atheism is, it needs to also share the burden of proof. Unless, if you don't want to, then you would be an agnostic. You would be someone who says that you're not sure that God exists.
No.
Therefore, you would relinquish that claim.
I look at it where, by definition, atheist says there's a lack of belief in God, and agnostic says I don't know. I don't believe in a God given everything that has been put in front of me. Now,
so are you saying a child would be an atheist, like a baby would be an atheist, since they don't have a developed view of anything?
no, because they wouldn't understand the question. That'd be like asking them to show them an engine. Well, but that's like showing them a car engine and saying fix that. They would have no clue what they're looking at.
Then maybe this is true. Then maybe you need to give your understanding of what atheism actually is a more philosophically coherent or definition of it. Maybe it's the proposition that God does not exist.
Well, can I interject really quick and try to bring up a kind of bridge to this? Whereas atheism is non-belief, I think, was created by activist organizations. Some activist organizations claim that the disbelief part was because of monotheistic oppression. But let's completely divorce ourselves from activist groups and their way of trying to police our speech, and say that for the topic of this discussion, atheism would be more of a disbelief than a non-belief. Would that be fair to both of you?
I'll go with that. And let me just put it again from my perspective. I've been an atheist for like 30 years. I have 4 children, 3 living. And for each of my children, I have told them where I stand. I told them what religion is and everything they could possibly need to know about it, and have let them come to their own conclusion. Now, 2 of them are adults or of adult age, and one's 5. But I've never tried to inhibit, like, I do believe some of the groups you're talking about overstep their boundaries. Um, at the same time, I think religion does the same thing. Like, I'm in, being Catholic, was baptized as a baby. And only recently have I heard that Christians are baptized at 18. So why can't we move something where stop pushing it so hard? Like my doctor's office as a kid had the books of a book about Noah on the table, and just pushed and pushed and pushed.
Can we talk about, let's move away from definitions, because those can't be fruitful, like you said, like the moderator said. I want to discuss about evangelizing the Christianity in society.
All right, I'm sorry, I need to interject it again really quick. Can we make this the last topic of the debate, like the last portion of it, and then we'll pick it up with miracles at a later time? If
sure.
That's because we've been going on for almost an hour, and I've been given instructions. So it's we can go on for a little bit longer, but not too much. So
all right.
I'm just saying there's time constraints.
All right.
No problem.
I wanted to say that how our country was founded on something which not expressed in the Constitution or the Declaration, but this understanding of virtue, of a country built, of a republic built on virtue, which means teaching your kids civic responsibility. And one of those things that has guided civic virtue has been God, has been Christianity. And there's more than a few quotations. In fact, virtually every one of our founders, including the so-called deists, which are maybe 3 or 4, every one of our founders, like Benjamin Rush, the father of American medicine, Jonathan Witherspoon, I could go on and on, John Adams, our 2nd president, Madison, our 4th president, they taught that virtue, and teaching the kids, teaching our students about the benefits of religion in general, and Christianity in particular. And I think having a book of Noah or a Gideon Bible in a hotel, in a motel room, or in a dentist office, I think that is doing the responsible thing. I would much rather have a Bible there than Letters to a Christian Nation by Sam Harris. The Bible is far more logical than anything Sam Harris has produced.
But technically we do have a Bible in almost every hotel room, and I've looked it up.
I'm saying it's a good thing.
I think it's fine because people can choose to pick that up or not. But I have looked up, and I've noticed that in almost every state, you have to be of a religion to be elected office. There is actually only about 2 atheists who are actually in office. So I don't think there's a decrease politically wise.
Why do you think that is?
Because everything is so instilled that I think people feel if they lose the religious grip, things will fall apart. Where I personally think, just like you can use the kid example or whatever, but I don't think people are gonna. I don't think the world would fall apart if we didn't say it has to be like it's God doing this, because people who are religious still do horrible things. I think it would be better to instill, like, people want to throw out evolution and put in creationism in the schools where you could do both. I've had a lot of teachers, and maybe because it's Catholic school, but tell me, well, they're just fables to teach a lesson. But okay, well, if they're fables, then which ones are true and not? Because if Samson used the jawbone to kill all kind of people, that's kind of a weird story. Why is all those stories not true and Jesus is? Like, who's picking and choosing? Why can't we instill the morals? And you could say God tells you to be this way, and we as humans want to be this way.
Well, humans is not something without a context, and it's with a historical and philosophical, and dare I say, a theological context. And I think this is something our new atheist, so-called new atheist brothers, they lack nuance, and I don't think they understand history. They seem to have an unwavering belief in reason, almost worshiping reason. We have to look at how a person goes through life. I don't know if you're aware of this book, and I love it. I love this author, Rodney Stark. He's a sociologist. He wrote this book called America's Blessings, Why Religion Benefits Everybody, including Atheists. And at the end of his book, in the last chapter, he projects that if you had a religious people rather than like a secular, ambiguity going on in our country, if we start teaching, Bible and so forth and so on, we would save as a country. Because of crime, because of welfare costs, we would save $3.2 trillion a year. You see, atheism comes with consequences, and as a former economics teacher, I think it comes with economic consequences also. And I don't think our country will live if we don't get back to God and do away with a lot of this secular ambiguity and philosophical nonsense by Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Matt Dillahunty and others.
Yeah. Can you still hear me? Shoot. Hold on.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, just making sure my screen did something. See, that's one of those. Let me say, I agree that some atheists have taken it too far, that they won't look the other way, but at the same time, using religion hasn't been the best guide. Like, we burned people for being witches, the Crusades. You can bring up a million things where that's the medium we're not getting at. Where, like, right now, there's the big gay thing where, okay, Christians love everybody except you can't be gay. Well,
but surely that's nothing compared to what atheism has done in the 20th century.
Nobody's cutting off anybody's heads in the name of atheism, though. I know Islam is not Christianity, but that's an example of a religion. It's religion taking that one thing too far. Atheists are not doing anything.
It's killing people, nonetheless. Well, you should know this. I teach this.
America is not communist. America is not communist, and we have atheists who are keeping it on the level. I think anything, like they say, in excess can go too far, sure. But, people bring up Hitler. Well, there's pictures of Hitler with the Pope. Everything goes too far.
What about Stalin and Pol Pot and Mao? What about 150 million people killed in the name of atheism or in the name of governments? But atheism
wouldn't that be
a huge part in communist governments?
Wouldn't that be politics, though? I don't think Stalin said, "I'm going to do this because there's no God."
No, but he's getting away from God, just like Dostoevsky said in his Crime and Punishment. If you get away with God, all things are permitted, and when you take history seriously, you have to come to grips with this. Look, I am not like you. I'm not sympathetic towards a lot of this atheistic and infidel type propaganda that's being spewed out. We need to confront this. And I'm not against a person freely being an atheist. I'm against these internet bullies or these these pseudo intellectuals like Sam Harris or Matt Dillahunty or Richard Dawkins. These are
Well,
not
let me say
scholars.
I agree with you, but I think at the same time, somebody, and I'm sure you know the name, somebody like Steve Anderson, who's screaming about killing homos, quote unquote, shouldn't be allowed either. I think we have to draw a line with everybody and say nothing too extreme. But
I don't know
that's
Steve Anderson, but that's a fair point. I think we
right.
Christians have a responsibility, but I think, I think y'all need to get your crowd together before you try to make the world in your own idiosyncratic and particular image. You need, just like Edmund Burke said. Who wrote Common Sense? To the moderator, who is the author of Common Sense? Thomas Paine, right? Thomas Paine.
I believe so. Let me double check on that.
Okay.
But I'm very certain that it is Thomas Paine.
Yeah, it's Thomas Paine. As he wrote Common Sense, and he wrote later The Age of Reason, or something like that. And he tried to show how religion was bad. And the American founders did not like it after he published these books. There was someone from England.
All right, I do need to correct you about the Common Sense pamphlet. Common Sense pamphlet was written by Thomas Paine to advocate for the independence from Great Britain. The secondary book that you talked about, The Age of Reason, I believe it is called. That was like Common Sense was celebrated by the founding fathers and by most of his Confederates. It was the Age of Reason, I think, or the Age of Reason was the one that they really hated.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. I do remember now. George Washington actually used Common Sense, and right before the Battle of New Jersey, I believe it was 1778, that surprise attack. But the Age of Reason, which said that it argued for revolutions and so forth, like making the world in a person's own image. It argued against the historical foundations of Christianity. You had this great not congressman, but a person in the government. I can't. His name was Edmund Burke of England. I believe he served in the House of Lords. He argued that before you try to make make the world in your own image, get your own house together. This is something that I think the atheist crowd doesn't like about Jordan Peterson, who tries to argue for the need for personal responsibility. I do believe a lot of these atheist types like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, they're utopians. And they maybe have an undergraduate level understanding of philosophy, but no understanding of history. And I do believe that the atheist community needs to get them under control.
Well, I think you're right. I've seen a lot of people I've seen atheists going against Jordan Peterson, and I think the problem is nobody's getting anywhere. Like, people are arguing, like somebody like Kent Hovind has been talking the same thing for 20 years. He may be right or wrong, but he hasn't gotten anywhere with it. None of us are getting anywhere. I wouldn't even know how to begin to hold down the atheists. I think they're trying by getting some of these groups together, but I don't think the fight has been going anywhere. Just to comment on what you were talking about, where George Washington, all these people, and I think you said it earlier, we were technically traitors. So it has to
Yeah, if
be, we have to say, well, we have to be our own people, but why are we our own people? And I don't think it
well,
takes a God to put that in there.
hold on. The Declaration of Independence, which said we were free from Great Britain, that explicitly mentions God and the Creator and the sovereign will at least 6 times. Thomas Jefferson, the alleged deist that hated Christianity, I have so many quotes from Jefferson alone, how he believed that Christianity, not religion in particular, but Christianity in particular, was the foundation of America, this virtue ethic. Now, he was more like a John Lockean type Christian that believed that, you know, um, many
Well,
denominations.
let me interject here really quick. We don't actually know what Thomas Jefferson was. Thomas Jefferson intentionally would allude that he was all the things that the deist, the Christian, the atheist. He wouldn't actually say affirm, and to my knowledge, he never affirmed what he believed in. And I think a big part of that was so his writings and stuff didn't get twisted, because he wanted to make a neutral thing. And the Christianity that he believed in, the Jefferson Bible, it is a historic relic of our nation's history. It was essentially all the red words of Jesus pasted together. And it was like, this is the version of Christianity I believe in. If Christianity is true, this is what I believe in.
And see, he cut out the miracle stores. This was that deist controversy. Now, the very vocal ones like Jefferson and others, Paine, were deists. Benjamin Franklin was a deist, but they still knew the importance of having a Christian foundation for our country. They believed in many of them, and especially those three, believed in separation of church and state, but not in the radical separation that that the internet infidel type crowd likes to propagate, but one that says that Christianity should have a place in our society, not a radical separation.
Let me tell you, I do agree with what you're saying, but I can't remember offhand where it came from, and I'm sure you've heard of this, but the the first Congress asked, well, before they became Congress, asked George Washington to be the king, and he said, "I did not fight a king to become a king." And to me, that shows they were trying to say we need to govern ourselves away, and they wanted to definitely practice their own type of religion, but I don't think it would have worked that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Here's the quote. He says, why should I be like, why should I be called King George the first, King George the First? Wow, we just got rid of King George the Third. Okay, King George the Third was the reigning king of England during this period. He knew that the important that how corruption could get into a country, and all of our founders knew that Republican democracy could fall away, and that virtue was within one generation of going away if we did not stand up and fight for virtue. And in their understanding, that was almost synonymous with Christ, not necessarily his miracles, as the example of Jefferson cutting out some of the miracle stories of the Bible, but having Christ.
I'm sorry to interject, but we're reaching upon that time to wrap things up. I'm sorry about interrupting you while you're in the middle of
You're good.
talk.
Let's just give 1 hour closing each. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Well, it's just, yeah, I'm just trying to be the timekeeper here.
Okay.
But do you want to move to closing thoughts after after
Yeah.
you finish up what you say, and then Chubbs rebuts, and then we'll go into closing thoughts.
I
But
was
the whole
essentially,
miracles thing, we can get into that in a later
yeah.
debate.
You know, I want to say this. This is an open challenge because I really understand these issues and have been studying them for a long time. This is an open challenge. We are bringing philosophy back and making it great again. It is one of my goals is to you know, deflate this so-called atheist empire. I think it's been found wanting and without clothes. All we have to do, and I think we can do this by the end of the year, we can really show it, show it's not philosophically a tenable position. But Chubbs, I will I'll let you go first if you want to go first.
Sure.
Closing.
Yeah, I just, what I see, as an atheist, that when we're, something like we're in court, we still put our hand on the Bible. Pledge of Allegiance has under God in it. I think religion is still strong, and I think it needs to be, again, leveled off to where, the point's getting across. And even if we were to put something like Jesus and say, okay, the Bible's true and everything, I don't see anything happening that shows God. So we have to, like you said, we have to live our lives and by people. So I see religion strong in the fight against it. And I think we can put the morals and ethics that, people who don't believe in God can use, and the people who do believe in God use. I think we need to try and come together, but at the same time, there's persecution on both sides, and people are accusing atheists of doing things or being a certain way, and all the science in the world can prove, say this and that, but in the end, none of us can prove that. We can't prove a God or disprove a God, but I don't see a God, so I have to live like there is no God, because for me, humans are born, they die, we multiply or not, but we teach what we're given. And to me, not thinking there's an afterlife, I want to be known as a good person. My legacy will go on eternally after I die through people being able to say that was a good person. And I think I can do it and teach it to other people. So that would be where I come from as an atheist, saying there is no God. So I'll go ahead and close with that. And so thank you very much for letting me get that across.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I do appreciate this debate, discussion. It was very fruitful. I do believe that a person's legacy is important, but I also believe if God does not exist, then why is anything at all important? Why are there any objective values at all in the world? Why does our legacy matter? Why is there a difference? How is there a difference between living a saintly life and living a murderous or a self-indulgent life? I wanted to read to you something, not read, but list something that Jonathan Whitfield, how he influenced the country. This Presbyterian minister, and I'm not a Presbyterian, I'm an Anglican, but this man, he influenced 12 state governors, 37 judges, and many of whom were on the Supreme Court, 10 cabinet officers, 12 members of the Continental Congress, 28 U.S. senators, and 48 United States congressmen, 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention, and future President little James Madison, our fourth president, took such detailed notes that we understand what was going on during the Constitutional Convention. And the protections that they wanted for something called the Bill of Rights, our first 10 amendments, because they knew how people would take advantage, because we have this proclivity in us. If you don't want to call it sin, if atheists don't want to call it sin, they don't have to. But history shows that we have this proclivity in us to do bad things. So what guides us? Well, if you're an atheist and you take it seriously, then you're going to have to look at the 20th century, and you're going to have to come to grips with 150 million people dead, largely because of atheism. Not totally, but largely. Just because you don't see something doesn't mean that's a good reason for it not to exist. It's only a good reason to think that something doesn't exist because you don't see it, as if what you thought would exist would have verifiable sense perceptions that could show it to be true and verifiable. But God, by his very nature, is a spaceless and timeless spiritual being. So I don't think we've seen any good reasons to be an atheist tonight. We've seen that the verification principle is self-defeating. It explains away things like art and the humanities and music. But we have seen things that point to the existence of God, like the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe in the initial conditions, the reality of objective moral values, intentionality. And so I think that the evidence does point, that shows that Christianity is true.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry, I almost interrupted you there. But thank you both for joining. Thank you both for giving your opinions and your arguments. Hopefully, I'll see you both about miracles. We'll set that up after stream. Be sure to give us a I'm going to do the standard YouTube shilling, like, subscribe, hit the bell button. I don't think any of that really does anything. The likes kind of help us, but it's more we more look at the view amounts. But give us some support on redpillreligion.com. The tip jars and everything is in the description below. And God bless everybody.